Let's cut to our sort of final quick discussion, and I should probably paraphrase that question, or I should really edit that question a little bit better to be JLL Asia Pacific. Earlier on, when we did the wordplay, you talked about ESG being mission critical in all of this. So, do you have much of an insight and a role within that strategy of developing the sort of the ESG guidance within JLL?
I'm fortunate enough to be asked to be part of a lot of the conversations with our ESG strategy. Part of that is because my line manager is a gentleman named Albert Ovidi, who heads up our property and asset management business, and he's the COO of Asia Pacific. He has been a proponent of ESG strategy for a very long time. Like, I honestly, not saying that to publicly kiss butt, he has been a proponent long before it was en vogue. And we've had a solid team of just contributors. I've sadly had to say goodbye to a couple recently because they're so in demand, right? Like, I mean, it's become a very hot item, but we've taken it very seriously as long as I've been at JLL. But what I would say here, the things that impact us the most here in Asia, I think Asia has such a diverse set of challenges because, you know, places like Hong Kong and Singapore, super modern, built into the clouds, but also built on a lot of reclaimed land. So our challenges aren't as immediate, but, you know, we could very well have a lot of the assets that we manage underwater if sea levels rise dramatically. So, you know, there's challenges like that here, but then we have challenges with, you know, actual toxic waste and things in some parts of Southeast Asia. We have trouble with traffic in a lot of Southeast Asia. I would say one of the big things that we're doing, because, you know, there's still commercial drivers at play here, is collaborating with some of the biggest conglomerates in Asia to develop smart cities. And usually that's from a transit-oriented development standpoint, so we can hopefully reduce traffic. Like, you know, yes, real estate assets are sort of the biggest contributor to embodied carbon in the world, but that's also because shelter is a fundamental human need. So, like, to simply attribute all of that to real estate, I think is unfair. There's lots of work to be done, but bring it back full circle, you get good data on all of these things and you can deal with the problem.
But speaking to JLL particularly, and I'm really interested in that line that you talked about. You know, you have a really unique set of challenges just because of the way that, you know, Asia is set up. How does JLL in your region deal with that?
Well, I mean, we have a dedicated team of I think it's around 20 people at this point. Okay. A lot of that is consultancy work, working with especially investors and developers to form their ESG strategy. But I think the biggest thing is actually for us is giving them measurable and achievable goals, because even the things like COP26 or like Singapore has 2030 targets, Hong Kong has 2050 targets, those are still abstractions. So a lot of what our work is right now is just putting a roadmap in front of that. Here are the things you can do now, right? And making it piecemeal enough that, one, you know, this is one of the things about that I think leads to this stereotype of conservatism in the property industry is that, you know, an asset is depreciated from day one. Like, you factor that in, you know, that depreciation, this isn't some crazy actuarial calculation. You kind of, you know what the decline looks like. So being able to help them cut that off at the pass, especially with an already built building, that's a big one. But the more actionable ones, which is what I think you're asking, is what I said before, is helping develop smart precincts from the ground up. So one of the companies we've been talking to and working with is a hydrogen fuel company. So applying that to logistics developments, helping logistics developers look at hydrogen fuel trucks that can't necessarily do full sort of trucking and logistical delivery, but they can be the vehicles that take care of that whole development. They can be the vehicles that go back and forth from a yard and things like that, which means now you can actually take the waste, have it converted into hydrogen fuel, and then put that into these trucks. So you're making a more circular economy at a portfolio level. And these are interesting explorations that are going on, especially in places like Vietnam, where you had a huge influx of industrial development over the last few years.
It's so wide-reaching, and it impacts everybody so differently depending on their geographical perspectives and their buildings and all this sort of stuff. So it's always going to be a challenge, and it's interesting where you pick up on the hydrogen side there, because again, that's always looking forward rather than the sort of the retrofitting, which I think is going to be the biggest challenge that our industry is going to face as we go on. But yeah, it's a really interesting insight.
There are some retrofitting activities, James, but I think that I would be looking for a job if I started talking about some of the things that we're developing. We have some really interesting.
But you're developing in-house here, or you're investing in?
So we're co-developing some strategies to help with that retrofitting. But it is a couple of them are very proprietary, and I'm very excited about when they come out because I'm an active player in those discussions. And that's not limited to us, right? Like I like to think we don't have competition based on the what I posited earlier. But you know, people who would call, or organizations that people would call our competitors, are doing some great things in the ESG space too. I personally, I think it's as urgent as I said it is. It's mission critical. But I do feel like it's a challenge that humanity in our industry is really ready to meet. I think that we're going to see a lot of change in the next few years, and it's easy to be cynical about it, especially when we see all the sort of hazardous weather that's gone on the last few years. But I do feel like it is something that people are tackling in earnest across the industry.
Yeah, I entirely agree.